Okay, I wanted to shoot a quick video explaining how the buttons and the menus work on the device before I start shipping these. I've had the opportunity to really streamline the menus and remove a lot of confusing settings and things like that in the last few weeks. So I think that now it's quite simple to use, quite easy to set up, and I'll go over really the only two cases that you need to interact much with the menu. So first thing I want to go over is just how it looks when you start it up. So it's already on, but let me just unplug it and plug it back in, and we'll see the startup menu here. So it says stabilizing, do not touch, and that just means that the load cell is initializing. And then it defaults to the manual setting. So typically the modes are over here, and then the weights are over here. So in manual mode, you'll see that the weight is displayed here. If I push on the catch cup, the value goes up. If I push on the bottom, the value goes negative. So that's essentially everything you need to know about the screen and the cup, and then there's the actual load plate itself. So going over the buttons, they're arranged in a row of 3 and then a D-pad type configuration. So the D-pad is pretty self-explanatory. The button on top is up, left, right, down, and the middle button is like center or select or yes. So this is kind of like the button you do to select a menu item. I'm just going to call it center for simplicity's sake here. Then we have 3 buttons over here, and I'm just going to label them 1, 2, and 3 from the bottom up. And I'm going to start with this button. So the bottom leftmost button is tear. So in general, you don't ever really need to use this button because all of the functions auto tear before dosing. So either manual mode or auto mode is all going to do the tearing for you. There is one case where this might be helpful, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But just to kind of demonstrate how it works, since the cup was on the scale when I plugged it in, it tore there, so it's calling this 0. But if I take the cup off, you'll see that the weight of the catch cup is here in negative. So for whatever reason, if I wanted to tear it, you could then put this on here, and it displays the weight of the catch cup, which is exactly 26.26. So that's the first button. The second button is the mode button. So switching modes, you generally want to have the catch cup off of the device because it will start dosing immediately otherwise. And if I click this middle button, you'll see it says tearing and then auto ready. So now it's in auto mode and it's ready for the cup to be placed on top. To go back to manual mode, you just click the mode button again, or button 2 here, and you can go back and forth. It has to tear for a moment before being in auto mode. Then once you're in auto mode, place the cup and it does its thing. Okay, so 17.92, which is in the range that I had programmed it. Okay, now just so that I don't accidentally spill beans on myself when I'm talking here, I'm just going to put it back in manual mode and put the cup here. And that brings us to the third button on the left, the top left button. This is settings. So if we click this, you can be in auto mode or in manual mode, but just note that in auto mode, it must say auto ready for you to enter settings. If it's in any other stage of dosing, such as when it says remove cup, actually I should show that, I don't think I did. There are a couple of messages that will be displayed here. So auto ready. And then when it's done, it says remove container. So you can't actually enter settings if it's still in part of the dosing routine, which this is. But once you remove it, you'll see it says auto ready. And now you can enter the settings from here. And now here are the settings. When I press this button, it simply goes to this menu. You can see there are 5 items, and you navigate them using the right and left button. So right, left, and the little dot moves to indicate which is selected. So exit, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. If you click the center button on exit, it just goes back to the original menu. I'm just going to put it back in manual here. So then go back into settings, and the second item here is dose. So this is where you set your target and your offset. So if we enter that menu, you see there's some text here, target, comma, offset, and then there are 2 numbers. It currently is set to 17.90 and 5.0. And I will discuss the offset a little bit later, but this is how you set them. So I've personally found that if my target is an 18-gram dose, that setting the stop point is 17.9 works really great here. And that's because the machine will always go up to this value and beyond. So the smallest amount it will accept and stop at is this. So if your bean weighs between 0.1 and 0.2 grams, then you usually want to set this, half of the average bean weight below your target. And then on average, you'll be kind of right at your target. The offset is again adjusted here. and I will talk about that later. But essentially, you navigate which number you want to change using right and left, and then you click the up and down buttons to increase and decrease that value respectively. So I know this value already works for these beans, and then when you're finished, you just hit the center button and it takes you back to the main menu. The third item is the pulse menu. It just allows you to change one value, which is the pulse duration of the small dosing chute. I'm not going to talk much about how this works or why you would want to change it, because it should be working perfectly when I finish calibrating it, and it probably isn't advisable to change it. But if for some reason in the future there is a reason to change it, I can go into more detail. But in any case, you can change it just like the other menus up and down. But usually I've tried to design everything so that something between 1 and 10 is optimal. So again, you hit the center button to go back to the main menu. So the fourth item on the list is Calibrate, and it has a sub-menu that has some useful information. So if we enter Calibrate, you'll see 1, are you sure you wish to continue? And this is yes and no if you want to go through and recalibrate your load cell. And then it has 2 numbers over here. The one on the bottom, the really big number, it's usually going to be somewhere between 4 and 6,000, is the calibration value for the load cell. And I have calibrated that when I assemble the device, but if for some reason it drifts over time, which I have not experienced, or you replace the load cell and something like that, you can recalibrate it. I don't really anticipate that really being required, but it's there in case it is. And I'll go through that shortly to show how it works. The number above here, it currently says 7.0, is actually the operating voltage of the dosing mechanism. This will be somewhere usually between 7 and 8 on the machines, and I've tuned it to work well with the specific hardware that's in the dosing mechanism. This number can actually be adjusted, but not in software. There is a power supply on the back with a small Phillips potentiometer, and you can twist it right and left to change this value up and down. However, I would not recommend doing that for a couple of reasons, unless I've told you to do that. One is that it's already set for what works optimally with the hardware, and that power supply will actually go up to 24 volts, but this can't actually read it that high, and you may end up frying the circuit completely if you turn it above 10. So if you ever change it, never go above 10, but it's probably best to not touch it in the first place. Okay, so now that I've gone over that, I'll show you, supposing there was something wrong with your weight measurements and you wanted to calibrate it. The best way to calibrate the scale is actually using one of the catch cups, and this is because it attaches perfectly with the magnets. So supposing we wanted to calibrate it, we would say yes on this menu. And, whoops, something weird happened there. I'm just gonna hit center again and it will say calibration failed, okay. And then I'm gonna go back to calibrate and say yes. I will fix that bug, don't worry about it. And now you get a message, remove all load, which means take everything off the scale, and then press the center button when ready. So I've taken everything off the scale and I'm ready, so I'm gonna click this button. So it's tearing. And now it says place known mass. So I'm gonna grab a reference scale, I'm gonna turn it on, and I'm gonna weigh the catch cup. Keep in mind that these magnets will interact with ferrous materials in your kitchen scale, so always measure it with the magnets up. The magnets aren't going to interact with this because I specifically designed it for that. So this weighs 26.26 grams. So now you put this on the scale and enter the weight you just recorded, which is 26.26, and then hit the center button and boom. So there's the calibration value. You can see it's almost identical to what it was before, and you can choose to reject or save that value. I can't really think of a reason you'd want to reject it, because the calibration routine has always worked, but that's in the menu. So you use the left button to reject it and the right button to say, yes, this is good and save. So in this case, this is good. So I'll say right value saved, and now we're back to the menu. So that is everything you need to know in the calibration menu. And let's go on to the last one, which is reset. Pretty self-explanatory, the first 2 options. So if we enter this menu, we can, it says reset all settings, question mark. No, just returns you to this menu. Yes will reset all the settings, so I'm just going to do that really quick, and you can see nothing particularly exciting happens because we've already had all the default settings here. But it did put this back to the original value, which has a 7 here instead of a 6. But So that's yes and no to reset. And I've saved the factory settings when I ship it out, so yes and no should work. Overwrite, be careful with this. So if you go to overwrite, you have the option to say, are you sure you wish to continue, yes and no. So in this case, I'm gonna say no. It takes you back to the main menu. But if for some reason in the future, and I really don't anticipate this happening, but suppose that something breaks, the load cell, the little motors, some part of the circuit, and I send you a replacement or something like that, and it gets put into the machine. Well, the original factory settings might not be perfect for that. So there is the option for you to go through and calibrate the load cell, set your pulse durations and all that, and then write those current values to the factory kind of like storage. So if you were to say yes, it would just write all of your current settings to the factory default. And then if you ever wanted to reload them from there, you could. So in general, you probably won't ever have to play with this menu, but it's there in case, since I want this device to last for as long as possible. So that's the settings menu. And now I'm just gonna go over a couple cases where you how you would mostly interact with the machine. The vast majority of the time, you're only gonna play with the dose menu. So I'm gonna exit, and here we are back in manual mode. One thing I forgot to mention, in manual mode, you can actually trigger the two dosing mechanisms manually. In auto mode, these buttons don't work, but the left button and the right button in this mode will fire the respective chute. So the left side is the high speed, high volume chute, and you'll see. And this is the precision chute. So the beans come out much faster with this one than this one. So if for some reason you wanted to just put some more beans in a cup or do it manually, you can, but I don't imagine anyone will really use it that way. These are also convenient for when you first fill the machine, just to make sure that the chutes have stabilized. You can run some beans through each of them before you start running any of the dosing modes. So then the last thing to know in manual mode is how to tell it to manually dose, and it's just the down button here. So you click this and it doses. So that's it. I'm trying to think. So yeah, we already went over those. Left, right, up. Up and center don't do anything in manual mode. It's just manual, manual, dose. And then if we go into auto mode, this is the one case, I'll try to replicate here, one case where you may actually need to or want to use this tear button. So suppose, so normally when you dose and remove the container, it auto tears so that it's ready for the next dose. But let me purposefully make that process get messed up. So I'll put it on here and it will dose. Okay, so there it goes, it's dosed. And it's asking me to remove the container. And when I remove the container, it's going to auto tear so that it's ready for the next dose. But if I did something like this, oh, yeah, perfect. I didn't actually remove the cup and then it tore. So it's saying the weight here is 0, but there's a pretty heavy cup sitting on top of it. So if I now go to remove the cup, the value is sitting at -44. And this is a problem because if I put the cup back on, it doesn't go. And that's because it's waiting for a threshold of 20 grams. The cups usually weigh about 25 grams. So it's not gonna start dosing until this value goes to +20. But there are a couple easy ways to fix this. The first would just be push on the cup and it will tear and go. Fixed itself. So now I'm gonna recreate that error again. I'm gonna lift and set it down and it tears, okay. So now again, it's mistakenly torn itself and the cup won't trigger it. The other thing you can do, so the first option is just to push on the cup. The next thing would be to take the cup off and use the tear button, which when I mentioned earlier, this is really the only time you really need to use it. If you hit the tear button, it just resets this, so now the relative weight of the cup is correct. And there we go, all good. And the last way you could correct this, I'm not gonna demonstrate it, I'll just say it, is if you take the cup off, switch to manual mode, and then switch back to auto mode, it will fix itself automatically. So that has only happened to me maybe 2 or 3 times in my entire time testing the device, but I just thought in case someone gets confused and that happens, that's your way out of the situation. Similarly, suppose that You know, you put the cup on there, you realize, oh, I accidentally left a couple beans. I don't want to wait for it to finish dosing. One way you can, really the only way to manually stop the dose, there's no button that does it, is to just push on the load cell. So I'll demonstrate that really quick. So suppose I put the cup and I think, oh, I didn't notice that there were some beans in here and the weight's all going to be off and I don't want to wait. So you put it in there and the instant it starts, just push on the cup and you'll see that it went up to whatever weight. And then you can take the cup out and everything will be good. It just allows you to stop it. So if at any time, either in manual or auto mode, you want to stop the dosing, just put light pressure on the catch cup and it will stop, because it will hit the target by your finger pushing on it and it will stop. So I'll show that one more time. Yeah, so you can stop it prematurely by just pushing on it. So those are all the menu items. If anything isn't clear or you have any other questions, please let me know. But I am in the final stretch here of assembling probably 10 units that will go out to the early buyers, and I'll monitor that for a few weeks and make sure that no weird issues crop up. And then I'll go into kind of manufacturing as many as I can. This opportunity to test multiple units at once has revealed all sorts of little things that have really helped me improve the robustness and my assembly process. So things should be getting much more efficient going forward. And I've had one of these sitting on my counter plugged in for several days just to see what happens if I leave it on. It's not really intended to be used for more than like 20 minutes because you just plug it in, pour your bag, dose out your beans, and then put it away. But I want to make sure that it will sit there indefinitely, not have any problems. So I have one that's on day 3 or 4 of just sitting there turned on and no issues so far. So I'm pretty confident that the circuits, the control mechanism, and all the hardware is robust and should last. And I will be getting these out as soon as I can.